Farmer finds golden eggs, but when they hatch, he starts to cry. In the heart of Cedar Valley, Texas, where the morning mist clung to the rolling hills like a delicate veil, John Miller walked through his family farm with heavy steps, the weight of generations pressed upon his shoulders as he surveyed the struggling chicken coops that had once been the pride of his parents. The farm's declining productivity mirrored his own diminishing hopes, with each passing month bringing new challenges that threatened to strip away his family's legacy. The autumn wind whispered through the empty feeders, a constant reminder of the mounting bills and dwindling income. John's weathered hands, calloused from years of labor, trembled slightly as he collected the day's meager yield of eggs. The market's shift away from conventional eggs had hit them hard, and despite his best efforts to adapt, nothing seemed to work. The thought of losing the farm that had sustained his family for generations gnawed at him relentlessly. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching from. Stay tuned. That crisp October morning started like any other, with John making his routine inspection of the property. The golden sunrise painted the landscape in warm hues, providing a stark contrast to the cold reality of his situation. As he approached the old storage shed, something unusual caught his eye, a shimmer among the bushes that didn't match the natural morning light. Drawing closer, John's breath caught in his throat. There, nestled in a perfectly arranged circle, lay 12 eggs unlike anything he had ever seen. They gleamed with an otherworldly golden sheen, their surfaces smooth and flawless, reflecting the morning light like polished mirrors. For a moment, he stood transfixed, wondering if the stress had finally gotten to him, but the eggs were undeniably real. With trembling hands, he carefully gathered the mysterious eggs, noting their unusual warmth despite the chilly morning air. They seemed to pulse with a gentle energy, almost like heartbeats beneath the golden shells. As he carried them toward the house, his chickens began acting strangely, their usually calm demeanor replaced by agitated clucking and nervous pacing. John's mind raced with possibilities. Could these eggs be from some rare exotic breed? If so, they might be valuable enough to save the farm. Yet something about them felt different, almost supernatural. He couldn't shake the feeling that their discovery wasn't merely coincidence, but rather the beginning of something much larger than himself. After careful consideration, John decided to place the eggs in his most reliable incubator. As he adjusted the temperature controls, he noticed unusual markings on the shells, intricate symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. The decision to incubate them wasn't just about potential profit. Something deeper, more instinctual, told him these eggs needed to be protected. That evening, as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, John called his longtime friend, Mike Thompson. If anyone could help him make sense of this discovery, it would be Mike, whose family had lived in Cedar Valley even longer than the Millers. As they discussed the situation, the wind picked up outside, and the farm's lights flickered ominously. "I've never seen anything like them," John explained over the phone, his voice tight with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "They're perfectly golden, Mike, and warm to the touch. The chickens won't go near them. Can't there's these strange markings?" Mike's long pause on the other end of the line spoke volumes. When he finally responded, his voice carried an edge of recognition that sent chills down John's spine. "My grandfather used to tell stories," Mike said slowly, "about special eggs that appeared during times of great need, but they were just stories, weren't they?" As night fell, John found himself unable to sleep, drawn repeatedly to the incubator where the golden eggs rested. The storm outside intensified, and with each flash of lightning, the symbols on the eggs seemed to glow faintly. The air in the room felt charged with possibility, and for the first time in months, hope began to bloom in John's heart, though tinged with an undercurrent of unease. Little did he know, his discovery of these mysterious eggs would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his family's land, the natural world, and the thin line between reality and myth. As he finally drifted off to sleep, the eggs continued their gentle pulsing, their golden surfaces reflecting more than just light. They held secrets that would soon transform not just John's farm, but his entire understanding of the world around him. The next few days brought changes to Cedar Valley Farm that John could never have anticipated. The golden eggs seemed to affect everything around them in subtle yet undeniable ways. The air itself felt different, charged with an electric energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Even the regular chickens had developed new behaviors, gathering in perfect circles at dawn and dusk, their eyes fixed on the barn where the incubator hummed steadily. During a particularly fierce storm, the power flickered and died, plunging the farm into darkness. John's heart nearly stopped as he realized the incubator's heat lamp would fail. Racing through the rain, he found Mike already at the barn door, emergency generator in hand. As they worked to restore power, both men froze at the sound emanating from the eggs, a soft, melodic humming that seemed to resonate with the thunder outside. "Did you hear that?" Mike whispered, his face pale in the beam of his flashlight. "It's like they're singing." Before John could respond, the humming stopped, replaced by a gentle tapping sound from within the shells. The eggs were beginning to move. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to the farm. A sleek black car pulled up the muddy driveway, and out stepped a man in an impeccable suit, a stark contrast to the rural setting. He introduced himself as Daniel Brooks, an international rare breed specialist, though something about his practiced smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Word travels fast in certain circles, Mr. Miller," Brooks said smoothly, his accent difficult to place. "I understand you've come across something extraordinary." He pulled out a business card that seemed to shimmer with an iridescent quality similar to the eggs themselves. "I represent a group of private collectors who would be very interested in acquiring any unusual specimens you might have." John's instincts screamed caution, even as Brooks mentioned figures that could save the farm 10 times over. How had he known about the eggs so quickly? Who had told him? The visitor's knowledge of the eggs' existence was almost as mysterious as the eggs themselves. As Brooks toured the property, the farm's animals fell unusually quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The businessman's questions were precise, targeted, revealing an unsettling familiarity with genetic anomalies and what he called biological peculiarities. He spoke of other cases, rare breeds with unexpected abilities, genetic mutations that defied explanation. "Think carefully about my offer, Mr. Miller," Brooks said as he prepared to leave. "These opportunities are as rare as the specimens themselves." He paused, adjusting his cufflinks, which John noticed bore the same strange symbols he'd seen on the eggs. "Though I should warn you, such specimens often attract unwanted attention. My organization can provide protection, resources, discretion." After Brooks departed, John discovered small electronic devices hidden near the barn, sophisticated monitoring equipment that hadn't been there before the visit. Mike helped him sweep the property, finding more surveillance gear tucked away in strategic locations. The implications were clear. They weren't the only ones interested in the eggs. That evening, as the sun set, the eggs began to pulse with an intense golden light. The symbols on their surfaces rearranged themselves, forming new patterns that seemed to tell a story. If only John could understand their meaning. He found himself sketching the symbols compulsively, filling notebook pages with their ever-changing designs. A letter arrived the next morning, delivered by hand rather than post. The envelope contained a single sheet of paper with a message in elegant script. "They belong to the earth. Some things must remain in balance." The paper was marked with a watermark, the same symbols from the eggs, arranged in a perfect circle. As John studied the message, the farm's behavior grew increasingly bizarre. Plants near the barn began growing at impossible rates, their leaves taking on a metallic sheen in the sunlight. The air became thick with a sweet, otherworldly scent that seemed to emanate from the soil itself. Most notably, the original chickens started producing eggs with faint golden speckles, as if whatever power resided in the mysterious eggs was spreading through the entire farm. Mike arrived that afternoon with news that deepened the mystery. His grandmother's journal, discovered in his attic, contained drawings of identical symbols to those on the eggs. The journal entries spoke of ancient fertility rites, of gifts from earth spirits that brought both blessing and burden. "There's more to this valley than we ever knew," Mike said, his voice heavy with the weight of generations of secrets. As night fell, The eggs' humming grew louder, harmonizing with a strange melody that seemed to rise from the earth itself. John and Mike watched in amazement as mysterious lights danced across the fields, weaving patterns that matched the symbols on the eggs. Something profound was stirring in Cedar Valley, something that went far beyond rare breeds and genetic anomalies. The true nature of John's discovery was about to reveal itself, and nothing would ever be the same. The hatching began during a rare celestial event, a night when the moon hung low and full, casting an ethereal golden glow across Cedar Valley. The first crack appeared in one of the eggs precisely at midnight, a sound that echoed through the barn like crystal breaking. John and Mike watched in amazement as one by one the shells began to split, revealing something extraordinary within. The first chick to emerge was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Its feathers were pitch black, but they shimmered with an iridescent quality that seemed to capture and reflect the moonlight in impossible ways. As it moved, waves of color rippled across its surface, deep purples, emerald greens, and flashes of gold that seemed to dance like auroras. "I am Chemani," Mike whispered in awe, but different, enhanced somehow. The rare Indonesian breed was known for its black features, but these chicks possessed an otherworldly quality that transcended their natural genetics. Their eyes gleamed with an intelligence that seemed almost human, and their movements were uncommonly graceful and coordinated. As each chick emerged, the air in the barn grew thicker with an electric energy. The original chickens in the nearby coop began to sing, there was no other word for it, in perfect harmony with the strange humming that had accompanied the eggs. The metallic plants that had grown around the barn swayed in rhythm, despite the complete absence of wind. One chick, slightly larger than the others, displayed particularly unusual behavior. It seemed to communicate with its siblings through subtle movements and soft trilling sounds, directing them with an almost military precision. When it turned its gaze on John, he felt a distinct presence in his mind. Not quite words, but clear impressions of thoughts and feelings that weren't his own. The peaceful wonder of the hatching was interrupted by the arrival of unmarked black vehicles at the farm's entrance. Men and women in dark suits emerged, carrying scientific equipment and speaking in hushed or urgent tones. Their leader, a stern-faced woman who introduced herself only as Agent Sarah, presented credentials from a government agency John had never heard of. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice professionally neutral, but her eyes intense, "we need to discuss the biological anomalies you've been harboring. Our satellites detected unusual energy signatures emanating from your property." She paused, studying his reaction. "We believe you may have encountered something of significant scientific interest." The chicks, sensing the newcomers, immediately fell silent and still. The larger one gathered its siblings behind it, in a protective formation that seemed impossibly sophisticated for creatures just hours old. The air grew heavy with tension, and John could have sworn he saw faint golden threads of energy connecting the chicks to each other and to the earth beneath them. Mike stepped forward, placing himself between the agents and the chicks. "This is private property," he stated firmly, though John could hear the slight tremor in his voice. "Unless you have a warrant, we're not obligated to discuss anything." The years of friendship between them had created an unspoken agreement. Whatever these chicks were, they needed protection. Agent Sarah's expression remained unchanged, but her next words carried a hint of warning. "Mr. Miller, Mr. Thompson, what you've discovered here goes beyond private property rights. These specimens could have implications for national security. We can do this the easy way, or..." She was cut off by a sudden burst of golden light from the barn. The chicks had begun to glow, their feathers emanating a soft radiance that grew stronger by the second. The larger chick locked eyes with Agent Sarah, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to ripple with invisible energy. The agent took an involuntary step backward, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. In that moment of confusion, the mysterious lights that had been dancing across the fields intensified, forming a protective barrier around the barn. The agent's equipment began malfunctioning, screens flickering with the same symbols that had adorned the eggs. Their satellite phones emitted only the strange, harmonic humming that had accompanied the hatching. John felt a gentle touch in his mind, The larger chick was communicating again, sharing images of ancient ceremonies, of sacred bonds between humans and creatures of power, of responsibilities passed down through generations. He understood, with sudden clarity, that these weren't just rare birds. They were guardians of something far older and more important than scientific curiosity or government interest. As dawn approached, the agents retreated to their vehicles, clearly unsettled but trying to maintain their authority. "We'll be watching, Mr. Miller," Agent Sarah called back. "Says what you have here. It's bigger than you know." But John was beginning to understand exactly how big it was, and he knew that his role in this mystery was only just beginning. The chicks settled into a perfect circle, their feathers still shimming with otherworldly colors. The larger one, now clearly their leader, began a soft trilling song that the others joined, creating a melody that seemed to make the very air vibrate with possibility. The plants around the barn grew visibly in response, their metallic leaves extending toward the chicks as if drawn by an invisible force. The days following the hatching brought increasingly extraordinary developments to Cedar Valley Farm. The Ayam Cemani chicks grew at an unprecedented rate, their iridescent feathers becoming more vibrant with each passing day. The leader, whom John had started calling Aurora for its brilliant display of colors, showed remarkable abilities that defied scientific explanation. One morning, John discovered Aurora orchestrating an elaborate dance among the other chicks, their movements creating geometric patterns that matched the mysterious symbols from the eggs. As they moved, the surrounding plants responded, growing and shifting to mirror their formations. The air sparkled with tiny motes of golden light, and the earth itself seemed to pulse with renewed vitality. Mike arrived breathless one afternoon, carrying a weathered leather journal he'd found hidden behind a false wall in his grandmother's house. "John, you need to see this," he said, hands trembling as he opened the aged pages. Inside were detailed drawings of birds identical to Aurora and its siblings, accompanied by text in an ancient script neither of them recognized. As they studied the journal, Aurora approached, its obsidian eyes fixed on the yellowed pages. Suddenly, both men experienced a shared vision, images of their ancestors gathering in secret groves, conducting ceremonies with magnificent black birds that glowed like living moonlight. They saw how these creatures had once been guardians of the land's fertility, working in harmony with chosen families to maintain nature's balance. "Our families weren't just farmers," Mike whispered as the vision faded. "They were custodians of something ancient, something sacred." The revelation was interrupted by the sound of an approaching vehicle. Through the window, they saw Frank Davidson, their bitter rival from the neighboring farm, storming up the driveway. Davidson, a third-generation farmer known for his industrial approach to agriculture, had always resented the Miller family's traditional farming methods. Now, he stood at John's door, his face red with anger. "Those birds are mine, Miller," he shouted. "And my grandfather's records clearly show that our family bred special lineages of Ayam Cemani. You must have stolen eggs from my property." The accusation was absurd. Davidson's farm had never housed anything more exotic than standard broiler chickens. But John could sense there was more to his rival's sudden interest. Davidson's eyes kept darting toward the barn, and his hands fidgeted nervously with something in his pocket that emitted a faint electronic hum. Aurora, sensing the confrontation, emerged from the barn followed by its siblings. The chicks arranged themselves in a defensive formation, their feathers rippling with waves of color that seemed to distort the air around them. Davidson's eyes widened at the sight, and he unconsciously took a step backward. "These aren't ordinary Ayam Cemani, and you know it," John said firmly. "They chose to appear here, and I think they had their reasons." As if in response to his words, Aurora raised its head and emitted a soft trill that made the ground beneath their feet vibrate gently. The metallic plants around the barn began to sway, their leaves chiming like tiny bells. Davidson's expression shifted from anger to poorly concealed fear. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Miller," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I've seen the government vehicles. I know about Brooks and his organization. This is bigger than your little family farm. Be smart. Sell them to me now, before things get complicated." The air grew thick with tension as Aurora slowly approached Davidson. The rival farmer froze as the bird's obsidian eyes met his, and for a moment the color seemed to drain from his face. Without another word, he turned and hurried back to his truck, though John noticed him placing what looked like surveillance equipment at the edge of the property before driving away. That evening, as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, John and Mike pieced together more of the mystery through their families: documents. The journal revealed that Cedar Valley had once been a sacred site, where the boundary between the natural and supernatural world grew thin during certain celestial alignments. The Ayam Cemani weren't just rare birds. They were physical manifestations of nature spirits, drawn to places and people who maintained harmony with the land. Aurora and its siblings spent the night performing increasingly complex rituals, their movements leaving trails of luminescent energy that sank into the soil. Where their feet touched the ground, crops began to sprout and flourish instantly, glowing with the same otherworldly vitality that emanated from the birds themselves. John watched in wonder as his failing farm began to transform. The ordinary chickens started laying eggs with speckles of gold, the withering crops rejuvenated overnight, and the very air seemed charged with possibility. But with Davidson's threats lingering and Brooks's surveillance equipment still hidden around the property, he knew this miracle came with a price, one that was about to demand more from him than he ever imagined. On a misty morning that shrouded Cedar Valley in ethereal light, a new visitor arrived at the farm. Dr. Elena Martinez stepped out of her modest hybrid car, her arms full of ancient texts and scientific equipment. As a local researcher specializing in agricultural biology and folklore, she had been drawn to the strange phenomena occurring at Miller's farm. "Mr. Miller?" she called out, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. "I've been documenting unusual growth patterns in the valley for months now, but nothing like what's happening here." She gestured to her tablet, which displayed satellite images of geometric patterns forming in the crops around his property. "Your farm has become an epicenter of something extraordinary." Aurora and its siblings watched Elena's arrival with unusual interest. The lead bird cocked its head, studying her with those intelligent obsidian eyes, while the others arranged themselves in a perfect spiral formation. As Elena approached the barn, the metallic plants parted before her, their leaves chiming in harmonic sequences that made her scientific instruments fluctuate wildly. "These readings are impossible," she murmured, staring at her equipment. "The soil composition, the electromagnetic frequencies, the growth rates, they're all operating outside known parameters." She pulled out a worn leather notebook filled with drawings that looked remarkably similar to the symbols from the golden eggs. "But they match perfectly with these ancient agricultural rites I've been studying." John and Mike exchanged glances as Eleanor explained her research. She had spent years tracking the intersection of traditional farming practices and unexplained phenomena throughout the region. Her grandmother, she revealed, had been a curandera, a traditional healer who spoke of special birds that appeared in times of great need, bringing messages from the earth itself. As they talked, Aurora approached Elena, its feathers shifting through impossible colors. The bird extended one wing, touching the corner of her notebook, and suddenly the air filled with shimmering images, three-dimensional projections of ancient ceremonies, showing people and birds working together to heal blighted lands and restore natural balance. "The old stories were true," Elena whispered, her academic skepticism warring with the evidence before her eyes. "These birds aren't just rare breeds, they're manifestations of earth spirits, drawn to places where the veil between worlds grows thin." She opened another notebook, this one filled with calculations and astronomical charts. "And according to my research, we're approaching a celestial alignment that occurs only once every several generations." The conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of helicopters. Through the mist, they could see black shapes circling the valley, monitoring equipment clearly visible beneath them. Elena's expression grew serious. "You're not the only one interested in these phenomena, Mr. Miller. My university department has been receiving pressure from private corporations and government agencies, all trying to access my research." Aurora trilled a warning note, and the other birds immediately formed a protective circle around the humans. The air grew thick with golden energy as symbols began appearing in the frost-covered ground around them, the same marks that had adorned the original eggs, now blazing with inner light. Eleanor moved quickly to her car, returning with an ancient-looking box, carved with familiar symbols. "My grandmother left me this," she explained, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it. Inside lay a collection of small artifacts, crystals that hummed in harmony with the birds, songs, seeds that seemed to pulse with their own inner light, and a map marked with ley lines that converged exactly on Cedar Valley Farm. "These birds chose your farm for a reason, Mr. Miller," Elena said, spreading the map across a weathered wooden table. "This land sits at the intersection of ancient power lines, natural channels of Earth energy that our ancestors knew how to work with. The upcoming alignment isn't just an astronomical event, it's a moment when these energies will peak." As if confirming her words, Aurora began a complex dance, its movements leaving trails of luminescent energy in the air. The other birds joined in, their synchronized motions creating three-dimensional patterns that matched the ley lines on Elena's map. The metallic plants around the barn grew visibly, their leaves forming intricate lattices that seemed to capture and amplify the birds' energy. John felt a familiar presence in his mind, Aurora sharing images of what was to come. He saw the valley transformed, not into an industrial agricultural center, as Brooks had proposed, but into something far more remarkable, a harmonious blend of ancient wisdom and natural abundance that could change their understanding of farming forever. But the vision also carried a warning. Dark shapes moved at the edges of his consciousness, hints of forces gathering to seize control of this power for their own purposes. The helicopters circling overhead were just the beginning. As Elena's instruments recorded unprecedented energy readings and the birds continued their mysterious preparations, John realized they were all standing at the threshold of something that would either transform Cedar Valley forever or see its ancient powers fall into the wrong hands. The transformation of Cedar Valley Farm accelerated with each passing day. Aurora and its siblings had grown to full size, their supernatural abilities becoming more pronounced. The once struggling farm now pulsed with vibrant life. Crops sprouted and matured in days rather than months, their yields exceeding anything previously recorded in agricultural history. But with this abundance came escalating pressure. Daniel Brooks returned, this time accompanied by a team of scientists carrying sophisticated equipment. "Think about the possibilities, Mr. Miller," he said, his smooth voice barely masking his intensity. "With proper study, we could replicate these effects globally. Your birds could revolutionize agriculture worldwide." John noticed how Brooks carefully avoided stepping on the geometric patterns that now marked the ground, how his eyes darted nervously whenever Aurora looked his way. The businessman's knowledge of the supernatural seemed too specific to be coincidental. When he mentioned similar specimens his organization had studied, John felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. Elena, who had been documenting the birds' influence on the local ecosystem, made a startling discovery. The metallic plants growing around the barn weren't just unusual, they were entirely new species, their DNA a complex fusion of ancient and unprecedented patterns. "They're like nothing in any botanical record," she explained, showing John and Mike her findings. "It's as if the birds are helping the land remember something it had forgotten." Aurora's latest display of power came during an unexpected confrontation. Frank Davidson had returned with land surveyors, claiming part of John's property sat on an incorrectly drawn boundary line. As they attempted to place markers, the earth itself seemed to reject their presence. Survey stakes pushed themselves out of the ground, and their electronic equipment displayed only swirling patterns matching the symbols from the golden eggs. The lead bird stood atop a small rise, its feathers blazing with color, as geometric patterns of light spread across the ground beneath the surveyor's feet. Davidson and his team found themselves gently but firmly guided off the property by an invisible force, their protests fading into confused silence as Aurora's song filled the air with harmonics that made reality itself seem to ripple. That evening, as John at Mike's and Elena reviewed her grandmother's journals, they discovered references to an ancient pact between certain families and the earth spirits. "The birds aren't just protecting the farm," Eleanor realized, translating the faded text. "They're preparing it for something. This alignment we're approaching, it's a moment of choosing. Mike shared stories passed down through generations of his family, finally understanding their deeper significance. "My great-grandmother used to tell us that the land remembers its guardians," he said softly. "That in times of great need, it would call them home. We always thought they were just bedtime stories." Aurora gathered its siblings in a circle around the humans, and suddenly they all shared a vision of Cedar Valley as it had been centuries ago, a sacred site where the barriers between the physical and spiritual worlds grew thin. They saw generations of farmers working in harmony with nature spirits, maintaining ancient balances that modern agriculture had forgotten. But the vision also showed darker possibilities, the land's power harnessed for profit, its sacred connections severed by those who saw only the potential for exploitation. The birds showed them Brooks's true intentions, laboratories where similar creatures were studied, their abilities quantified and commodified, their connection to the earth weakened with each experiment. As the vision faded, Elena's instruments detected massive energy fluctuations throughout the valley. The approaching celestial alignment was affecting the ley lines she'd mapped, increasing their power exponentially. The birds responded with increasingly elaborate dances, their movement seeming to weave invisible threads of energy into the earth itself. John felt Aurora's presence in his mind growing stronger, sharing impressions of what needed to be done before the alignment. The bird showed him hidden places on the farm where ancient tools lay buried, waiting to be rediscovered. Each unearthed artifact bore the same symbols as the golden eggs, forming part of a larger pattern they were only beginning to understand. Meanwhile, the government surveillance continued, but with a noticeable shift in strategy. Instead of obvious monitoring, hidden sensors appeared in unlikely places, disguised as rocks, buried beneath new growth, hidden in the canopy of trees. Agent Sarah's team maintained their distance, but their presence remained constant, waiting for something only they seemed to anticipate. The pressure to make a decision mounted as Brooks's deadline approached, and Davidson's legal threats intensified. But Aurora and its siblings seemed unconcerned with human schedules. They worked to their own rhythm, guided by celestial forces beyond mortal understanding, preparing the land for a transformation that would challenge everything John thought he knew about his family's legacy. The celestial alignment drew closer, and Cedar Valley Farm hummed with unprecedented energy. Aurora and its siblings had transformed the landscape into something that straddled the boundary between natural and supernatural. The metallic plants now formed vast mandalas visible from above, their patterns shifting in perfect synchronization with the birds' movements. Elena's research took an extraordinary turn when she discovered ancient petroglyphs in a previously hidden cave system beneath the farm. The cave walls bore images that perfectly matched the symbols from the golden eggs, along with depictions of birds that could only be the ancestors of Aurora and its siblings. "These markings," she explained, her voice filled with wonder, "they're instructions for a ritual that hasn't been performed in centuries." The birds seemed to respond to this discovery with increased urgency in their preparations. Aurora led its siblings in increasingly complex ceremonies, their dances leaving permanent changes in the landscape. Where their feet touched the earth, crystalline structures emerged, humming with frequencies that made Elena's instruments display impossible readings. Mike arrived one morning with news that deepened the mystery. "I found more of my grandmother's journals," he said, spreading the weathered pages across John's kitchen table. "She wrote about a convergence of powers that happens when the stars align just right. The birds," she called them the Awakeners, "they're not just here to save the farm, John. They're here to restore something that was lost." The journals spoke of a time when humans and nature spirits worked in perfect harmony, using sacred sites like Cedar Valley to maintain the Earth's balance. The golden eggs weren't just rare genetic anomalies, they were physical manifestations of this ancient partnership, appearing only when the world was ready for its renewal. As they studied these revelations, Aurora approached the table and gently touched one of the journal pages with its beak. Instantly, the room filled with holographic images, three-dimensional scenes of past ceremonies, showing how their ancestors had worked with the birds to channel the Earth's natural energies. The visions were so vivid that John could feel the ancient wisdom flowing through him, teaching him things that had been forgotten for generations. But outside forces were closing in. Brooks's surveillance equipment grew more sophisticated, hidden in places that seemed to defy normal human access. Davidson had begun hosting mysterious meetings at his farm, attended by figures who arrived in unmarked vehicles and spoke in hushed tones about containment protocols and energy harvesting. Elena's instruments detected attempts to interfere with the farm's growing energy field. "They're trying to disrupt the natural frequencies," she explained, pointing to complex waveform patterns on her screens. "But the birds are adapting, creating protective harmonics that shield the entire valley." Aurora responded to these intrusions by teaching its siblings new defensive measures. The birds learned to project fields of golden energy that could gently but firmly redirect unwanted visitors, their combined power creating a sanctuary where the ancient magic could flourish undisturbed. One afternoon, as storm clouds gathered ominously overhead, the birds performed their most impressive display yet. Moving in perfect unison, they created a living mandala of light and energy that spread across the entire farm. The metallic plants responded by growing into elaborate archways and spirals, forming a vast natural temple that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. John felt Aurora's presence in his mind, stronger than ever before. The bird shared visions of what the alignment would bring, a moment when the veils between worlds would thin, allowing the ancient powers to flow freely once again. But with this revelation came a warning. Others would try to harness this power for their own purposes, seeing only its potential for profit and control. The pressure to make a decision mounted as Brooks made his final offer, promising protection from both government intervention and Davidson's legal threats. "The alignment is coming, Mr. Miller," he said smoothly. "When it does, you'll want to be on the right side of history." His words carried an undertone of threat that made John's skin crawl. That evening, as the sun set behind storm clouds that crackled with unusual energy, Aurora gathered its siblings in a circle around the farm's central crystal formation. Their combined singing created harmonics that seemed to reach into the earth itself, awakening something deep and powerful that had slumbered for centuries. The ancient texts had spoken of a choice that would need to be made when the stars aligned, a decision that would determine not just the fate of Cedar Valley Farm, but the future of humanity's relationship with the natural world. As John watched the birds prepare for whatever was coming, he realized that everything, the golden eggs, Aurora's appearance, even his family's long history with the land, had been leading to this moment. The week before, the celestial alignment brought changes that transformed Cedar Valley Farm into something beyond imagination. The metallic plants had grown into towering crystalline structures that caught and amplified the growing energy in the valley, their surfaces reflecting aurora-like patterns that matched the shimmer of the birds' feathers. Eleanor's research reached a breakthrough when she decoded more of the ancient symbols. "These aren't just decorative patterns," she explained, excitement making her voice tremble. "They're a sophisticated language, instructions for channeling earth energy during the alignment. Your ancestors understood things about natural forces that modern science is only beginning to grasp." Aurora and its siblings had grown more magnificent, their feathers now emanating a constant soft glow that intensified with their rituals. The lead bird had developed the ability to create three-dimensional projections of its thoughts, sharing complex visions that helped John understand the true significance of what was approaching. One such vision revealed the hidden history of Cedar Valley. The farm sat at the intersection of powerful ley lines, natural energy channels that crisscrossed the earth. During certain celestial alignments, these channels would surge with power, creating potential for either tremendous harmony or devastating imbalance, depending on how humans chose to work with these forces. Mike discovered that his grandmother's journals contained prophecies about this specific alignment. She wrote that when the Golden Ones return, he read from the weathered pages, humanity will face a choice between remembering or forgetting, between working with the Earth's power or trying to control it. The birds' preparations took on new urgency. A strange phenomena increased across the valley. The air itself seemed to crystallize at times, forming temporary windows through which glimpses of other realities could be seen. Visitors to the farm reported losing track of time, experiencing visions of past ceremonies, and feeling unprecedented connections to the natural world. Brooks made his final move, arriving with a team of specialists and equipment unlike anything John had seen before. "We've studied phenomena like this before," he revealed, his careful facade cracking to show genuine concern. "Without proper containment, the energy surge during the alignment could have unpredictable effects. Let us help you control it." But Aurora's reaction to Brooks's equipment was immediate and clear. The bird gathered its siblings into a defensive formation, their combined energy creating a shield that caused the sophisticated machinery to malfunction. Through their shared mental connection, John saw flashes of other sites where similar attempts to contain natural forces had led to disaster. Davidson's farm had become a staging ground for what looked like a military operation, though Elena's instruments suggested their real purpose was more complex. "They're trying to build some kind of energy collection array," she explained, studying readings from her sensors. "If they interrupt the natural flow during the alignment, it could destabilize the entire network of ley lines." The pressure reached its peak when Agent Sarah returned, this time with an official order demanding access to the farm during the alignment. "This is bigger than your family legacy, Mr. Miller," she insisted. "The energy readings we're detecting could revolutionize our understanding of physics itself. We can't just leave that in the hands of private citizens." John felt Aurora's response through their mental link, a series of images showing how humanity's attempts to control and harness natural forces had repeatedly led to catastrophe. The bird shared visions of ancient societies that had tried to exploit similar power convergences, only to lose everything when they failed to understand the delicate balances involved. As storm clouds gathered overhead, crackling with unusual energy, Aurora initiated what seemed to be a final preparation ritual. The birds arranged themselves in a complex geometric pattern, their combined energy creating a resonance that awakened something deep within the earth. The ground trembled gently as crystal formations emerged in perfect symmetry, forming a vast natural amphitheater around the farm's central field. Eleanor's instruments recorded unprecedented energy readings as the birds' power merged with the rising force of the ley lines. The metallic plants grew and shifted in response, their structures forming a living architecture that seemed designed to channel and direct the coming surge of power. Through it all, John felt the weight of generations of stewardship pressing upon him. His ancestors had protected this land not just as farmers, but as guardians of something far more precious, a sacred trust between humanity and the natural world. As the alignment approached and pressure mounted from all sides, he realized that his decision would affect far more than just his family's farm. The night of the celestial alignment arrived with an otherworldly dawn. The sky above Cedar Valley took on impossible colors, sheets of aurora-like light rippling across the heavens despite the geographical impossibility. The metallic plants had grown into a vast crystalline cathedral, their structures humming with frequencies that made the air itself vibrate in harmony. Aurora and its siblings began their most elaborate ceremony yet, their movements creating patterns of light that merged with the energy flowing from the ley lines. The birds' feathers blazed with inner fire, each one a living prism that captured and redirected the growing power surging through the valley. Elena's instruments were registering readings that defied scientific explanation. "The energy patterns are identical to those recorded in the ancient texts," she exclaimed, her academic composure cracking with excitement. "The birds aren't just channeling power. They're re-establishing connections that have been dormant for centuries." The convergence started subtly at first, a gentle trembling in the earth, a strengthening of the golden light that had begun to fill the valley. But as the planets moved into alignment overhead, the power grew exponentially. Crystal formations erupted from the ground in perfect geometric patterns, creating a vast network that pulsed with living energy. Brooks arrived with his team just as the phenomenon was beginning, their vehicles loaded with equipment designed to contain and redirect the surging power. "This is your last chance." "Miller," he called out over the growing harmonic resonance, "what's coming is too powerful for any individual to handle. Let us help you control it." But Aurora's reaction made it clear that control was exactly the wrong approach. Through their mental connection, John saw visions of similar attempts throughout history. Moments when humanity had tried to harness and dominate natural forces rather than work in harmony with them. Each attempt had led to disaster, the very Earth itself rejecting such artificial constraints. Davidson appeared with his own team, their real agenda finally revealed. "The energy signatures match the prophecies," he shouted, his eyes wild with zealous fervor. "My family has waited generations for this moment, the power of the ancients finally within our grasp." As if in response to these competing forces, the birds' ceremony intensified. Aurora led its siblings in a dance that seemed to bend reality itself, their movements leaving trails of golden light that formed three-dimensional mandalas in the air. The metallic plants responded, growing and shifting to create channels for the surging energy. John felt Aurora's presence in his mind, stronger than ever before. The bird shared visions of what was truly at stake, not just the farm or the valley, but the restoration of an ancient partnership between humanity and the natural world. The alignment wasn't just an astronomical event, it was a moment of choosing that would determine the course of this relationship for generations to come. Elena's grandmother's journals had spoken of this moment. When the stars align and the golden ones dance, the veils between worlds will thin. The choice made then will echo through time, determining whether humanity remembers its place in the greater harmony or continues down the path of separation. Agent Sarah and her team attempted to establish a perimeter around the farm, but the growing power made their equipment malfunction. The very air seemed to reject their presence, golden light coalescing into gentle but firm barriers that kept them at bay. Nature itself was creating a sanctuary where this sacred moment could unfold undisturbed. The pressure of competing interests reached its peak as the alignment neared its apex. Brooks's team deployed their containment devices while Davidson's followers attempted to tap into the surging energy. Government agents coordinated with satellite systems, trying to monitor and analyze the unprecedented phenomenon. But through it all, Aurora maintained its focus on the ceremony, guiding its siblings in movements that grew more complex and powerful with each passing moment. The bird's obsidian eyes reflected ancient wisdom as it worked to channel the growing forces in accordance with patterns established eons ago. John stood at the center of it all, feeling the weight of his family's legacy and the trust placed in him by these remarkable creatures. The farm had become a nexus of forces both natural and supernatural, and his decision in the coming moments would determine far more than just his own future. As the alignment reached its critical point, the sky erupted with curtains of golden light that merged with the energy patterns created by the birds. The very fabric of reality seemed to thin, offering glimpses of other times and possibilities. Cedar Valley Farm stood on the threshold of transformation, awaiting the choice that would determine its destiny. At the height of the celestial alignment, Cedar Valley Farm became the epicenter of a transformation that would forever change the relationship between humanity and nature. The sky blazed with impossible colors as Aurora and its siblings completed their ancient ceremony, their combined energy merging with the surge of power from the awakened ley lines. The moment of choice arrived with crystalline clarity. Brooks's containment devices hummed ominously, threatening to disrupt the natural flow of energy. Davidson's followers chanted in misguided attempts to seize control of the power. Government agents watched with a mixture of awe and apprehension as their instruments recorded readings that defied explanation. But John Miller, guided by generations of farming wisdom and the deep connection he'd formed with Aurora, understood what needed to be done. Rather than trying to control or direct the surge of power, he opened himself to it completely, accepting his role as guardian rather than master of these ancient forces. Aurora's presence filled his mind with visions of possibility, not of industrial-scale exploitation or scientific advancement, but of a renewed partnership between humans and the earth itself. The bird showed him how farming could be transformed, not through control and manipulation, but through cooperation with nature's own rhythms and powers. The crystalline structures that had grown throughout the farm began to pulse with golden light, forming a vast network that connected everything: plants, animals, earth, and sky. The metallic plants wove themselves into living architecture that would serve as permanent channels for the Earth's natural energy, ensuring that the power of this moment would continue to flow long after the alignment passed. Elena's research finally made complete sense as she witnessed the fulfillment of her grandmother's prophecies. "It's not about controlling the power," she exclaimed, her voice filled with wonder. "It's about becoming part of it." Her instruments captured readings that would revolutionize humanity's understanding of natural energy, not as a resource to be exploited, but as a partnership to be honored. Brooks, witnessing the true magnitude of what was unfolding, realized the futility of his containment attempts. His sophisticated equipment, designed to harness and control, simply dissolved into pure energy that fed back into the Earth's natural systems. "I was wrong," he admitted, his carefully maintained facade cracking at last. This was never meant to be contained. Davidson's followers, too, found their attempts to seize power transformed. The energy they tried to capture instead flowed through them, awakening ancient memories of humanity's original harmony with nature. Many fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the recognition of what had been forgotten. The government agents, led by Sarah, witnessed something that would challenge their entire understanding of national security. True power, Sarah realized, lies not in control, but in cooperation. Her team's reports would later lead to the establishment of new protocols for protecting and preserving sites of natural power rather than exploiting them. As the alignment reached its peak, Aurora initiated the final phase of the transformation. The bird siblings arranged themselves in a perfect circle, their combined energy creating a permanent bridge between the physical and spiritual aspects of the land. The farm would become a living example of how humanity could work in harmony with nature's own power and wisdom. The surge of energy reached its crescendo, and for a moment, everyone present experienced a shared vision of possibility, a future where farms like Cedar Valley would serve as sanctuaries of natural wisdom, where the ancient partnership between humans and earth spirits could flourish once again. The golden light that had filled the valley seemed to sink into the very soil, becoming a permanent part of the land's essence. When the light finally dimmed and the alignment passed, Cedar Valley Farm had been transformed. The metallic plants remained, their crystalline structures now a permanent part of the landscape. Aurora and its siblings took up permanent residence, their presence ensuring that the farm would continue to serve as a bridge between worlds. John's decision to trust in the natural order, rather than try to control it, had opened the way for something far greater than mere financial success. The farm became a living demonstration of new possibilities in agriculture, where crops flourished without chemical intervention, where animals thrived in natural harmony, and where the Earth's own power provided all that was needed. Elena established a research center on the property, dedicated to studying and sharing the principles of natural harmony demonstrated by the farm. Mike's family records became the foundation for a new understanding of traditional farming wisdom, proving that the old ways had contained profound truths about working with nature rather than against it. The birds continued their ceremonies, though now their energy worked in steady, sustainable ways rather than dramatic bursts. Under their guidance, Cedar Valley Farm became a place where the veils between worlds remained thin, where the ancient partnership between humanity and nature could be experienced and understood by all who visited. As word of the farm's transformation spread, it became a beacon of hope and possibility. Farmers from around the world came to learn, not how to control nature, but how to work in harmony with it. The golden eggs legacy lived on, not as a source of profit or power, but as a reminder of humanity's true place in the natural order, not as masters, but as partners in the great dance of life. Dear listeners, we hope John Miller's extraordinary journey at Cedar Valley Farm has touched your hearts and awakened something ancient within your own spirit. The partnership between humanity and nature continues to flourish, much like the golden birds that transformed a simple farm into a beacon of hope. To continue exploring such remarkable tales of transformation and wonder, we've prepared a special playlist of equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the magic that exists in our world, waiting to be discovered. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment when nature seemed to reach out to you in unexpected ways? Join our community of storytellers and dreamers as we continue to explore the extraordinary in the ordinary. Don't miss our upcoming content. Each story is a new opportunity to remember our connection to the magic that surrounds us.